What is going on, guys? How you doing? This is the second of a two-part video that I split up because I was having a hard time coming up with some content about my life. Not that I don't have a lot of content, I was just like, what could I talk about? What could I come up with? So my last video was about, what was it about? The last video I posted. Oh, when I was homeless. And then I said I was going to combine it with my time in Jamaica, because that's another story that I got a lot of stuff to tell you. But I decided to not have an extended video because I talk a lot, and so I decided to split those two stories up. So my last video was about when I was homeless, and this video is about my time in Jamaica. So let me preface this story. Some of my stories that I post tie in together. The story that I told about my divorce, I didn't do a deep dive on my time in Jamaica, but I did tell the story about my divorce and how prior to my divorce, we had split up because of her, because she wasn't happy, and we had split up. She left me, and so I moved to Jamaica, and so I kind of touched on that video, and you can go look for it on my channel. It's my story about my divorce, well, my marriage, and then ultimately my divorce. And so when I'm doing the deep dive videos like I am with this one, it literally is just going to tell my story about that particular topic, and that one ties into that other one, which ties in now to my full story. So the preface is that when we split up, because she left me, it was on a trip to Jamaica that her and I were supposed to be on, and she declined to go. You can go watch that video. So a friend of mine bought her ticket. This is at a day where you could spend $100 and then just have the name transferred over, which you can't do anymore. So he bought her ticket, and me and him went together. And I ended up like Stella. I think the first week we're there, I met this woman named Sophia. And Sophia became my Stella. Like, if you remember the movie Stella Got Her Groove Back, that was kind of what was going on. And I actually felt kind of guilty at the time because I was still married, even though I didn't know at the time while I was gone that my wife had moved out of the house. So she broke the vow before I did, to be fair. Like, till death do you part, blah, blah, blah. And she wasn't happy, so rather than get counseling or rather than try and work it out, she just left. So she broke the vow, but then I did too, almost at the same time when I was there. And then Waylon met up with a girl there, and we ended up infatuated with them. And when I got back home on that trip, I realized that she had moved out, and then we went back a couple more times within that same year. And then I was running low on funds, and I asked her for an equity loan on the house, and she wouldn't sign for it. So eventually I sold the house, and I took my part of the money from the sale of that house, and it's like, what do I do now with the rest of my life? Like, what do I do? So at one point I wanted to just get an RV and go travel the United States. I had roughly about 35,000. Then at another point I'm like, nah, scrap that. Let me go back to California, resume my life in California. But that 30 grand is not going to last very long. Another point, I decided I was going to stay here and maybe, I don't know, I had different ideas. And then I had this epiphany about, let me just move to Jamaica. I love it so much. I love the beach. I love the weather, blah, blah, blah. And at that time, this was 2002, at that time, YouTube wasn't around to kind of guide you on the way they do now, where there's expats that are living in Jamaica that have been there for a year or 2 or 5 years or whatever, and they're giving you information on YouTube about what to expect or the do's and the don'ts and all that stuff. There wasn't any of that at that time. So I was kind of hoofing it. There were a couple of things that I found out relatively early on those 3 trips that I did make, because I'm kind of street smart, and I kind of figured that there's going to be a skin tax, is what they like to call it in the Philippines, skin tax. Meaning if you're a foreigner, you're getting charged more for everything. So that held true there, and I knew that. So when I started getting deep into making that decision to move to Jamaica, I was going through, what did I go through? I think I went online through the Gleaner, which is the only real newspaper in Jamaica, and I started looking for apartments to rent, rooms to rent, whatever. And I found a couple, 2 or 3 of them. So my girl, Sophia, happened to be in Old Harbor, which is out by Kingston at that time, and I'm on the north side. In other words, where I want to be is the north side, and I was looking specifically on the north side. It would be Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, somewhere perhaps in Portland, which is on the north side. So there were like 3 of them that I was really, really interested in, and so I sent Sophia some money for her to catch, a ride to get over to the north side and, pay for her travel and all that stuff and go check these out on my behalf. Because I knew that if they thought she was interested in renting, I would get the real price. Or even if the price was already posted in the paper, let's say it was 18,000 Jamaican dollars every month, right? That 18,000 would stay to 18,000. That they wouldn't go, well, this has to blah, 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 and then all of a sudden it's 20 or 25,000, right? So I just kind of knew that. So I had her go look. So she went and looked at a couple of them and called me and said, I'm not really sure those are going to work out for what you want, blah, blah, blah. Eventually she saw this one that I had also checked off, and I said, well, what about this one that I had talked about? And she's like, yeah, you're not going to like that one. I'm like, really? Because it sounds really, it sounds good. She's like, yeah, you're not going to like it. I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. You're going to love it. I'm like, oh, well, go ahead and rent it. It was 12,000, if I'm not mistaken, it's 12,000 Jamaican dollars. And at that time, 12,000 amounted to 200 a month. With the value of the dollar, I think it was 48. I think it was 45 or 48 to 1 at that point. So it was about $200, and I'm like, ooh, what a deal. Yeah, I'll do that. She paid the landlord the first and months, the first and last in the deposit and all that stuff on my behalf. And I rented it sight unseen based on what she said. And when I got there, it was like, ooh, this is great. It was a house proper, a large house, upstairs, downstairs. But when they built the house, they split off the top of it and made 2 separate apartments. Because typically what we do here is we have a basement. And so when the old folks get too old and all that stuff, we stick them in the basement. There, they don't have basements. So instead, they have the main house, and then upstairs they usually use for the old folks when they get old. But in the interim, they rent those out as apartments, and that's what I ended up getting. It was I don't know if I ever measured it out properly. My best guess, it was probably pushing 800 square feet. It may have been 1,000. But basically, you walked in, it was a living room, good sized living room, good sized kitchen. Walk down a hallway, there's a bedroom off to the right, the smaller of the 2 bedrooms. In between, there's a bathroom. And then at the end of the hallway, there's one large bedroom. So it's a very, very good deal. And because everything in Jamaica is basically gated, in other words, in the front they've got a gate and some type of wall or something going on, it's very safe. And also that I could leave it and I don't have any worries about somebody breaking in and all that stuff. So it was a good deal. It was a good deal. Once I rented that, now it was a matter of getting down there and figuring out what I was going to take. So I packed a couple barrels. They call them drum, but a couple of barrels. I packed a couple of barrels of some work type of stuff that I could do some work down there, some tools and stuff like that, and then personal possessions and clothes and stuff like that, and I had them shipped down there. And eventually went down there in mid-2002. Eventually went down there to live. And on that video that I talked about my divorce, my focus was that my then wife would get really upset that she could not find me to get child support, that she could not, you know, like I just disappeared, right? Not because I didn't want to be included, but because it takes two to tango. And she had basically, you know, like broken us apart at that point. I didn't want to break apart because of my son. He was my priority, but I needed her to see that, because I can't just like go move in with her and say, hey, I'm staying. Anyway, all that to say, the reason I moved down there pretty much permanently is because of that situation. I was trying to get her to see the light. That was my focus and my intention. However, at that time, you could only stay 6 months. So that lined up with my son's birthday in the middle of the year, and then Christmas. So I would come back on his birthday, I would come back on Christmas, so that I could leave there every 6 months, and then come back again. And it was a year and a half, almost a year and a half, before she saw that light that I was trying to shine on her. And she's like, yeah, you kind of got to come back. I'm like, you think? And so I did move back. Now, to be fair, when I moved down there, my worldly possessions were locked up in a trailer that I have, a work trailer that I have, and I parked it at a friend's house. And so it wasn't a, when I say permanent move, I didn't sell everything I owned and live down there. I took what I thought I would need, and then the rest of it was still here. So the idea of me giving up my control, because the only thing I can control is what I can control, not us. So the idea of giving up total control over a situation that I don't have total control over was to keep that apartment, just in case she switched up on me again. So I agreed to come back. But the agreement, the stipulation of the agreement was I'll come back under two conditions. One, I keep my apartment. And she agreed, and continue to pay rent on it monthly. Two, I come back and forth. I take off and go to Jamaica on my own 2 times a year, 3 times a year, whatever the case was, and she agreed. And that's what I did. And that's why I have a 20-year history there. 21, to be fair. So during that time, I'm going to say of all the trips that I made during all that 20 years, I have a solid, if you add it all together, you know, 3 weeks there, 2 weeks, a month, you know, if you add it all together, I have a solid 4 years plus of living in Jamaica. Split up, of course, but, you know, solid 4 years. Plus a solid, you know, year and a half that I lived there. My takeaway, now that I look back at that time, because I gave up the apartment, I gave up on Jamaica 2 years? 2 years ago now. Yeah, it's 2026, so this month is actually my 2-year mark. 2 years ago I gave it up. And I gave it up not because of any other reason than the people. I love the island. I love the beaches. I love all the snorkeling and all the adventures and all the things that I did down there. But the people suck. I had a channel years ago. I believe it was called Jamaica Bob. And that channel had to do with my information I could put out there, what taxis to take, make sure you don't get ripped off by the taxi driver. This is what you should do and not do. These are the things you should say and not say. These are the foods that are available. You know, just the different information that I derived from my time there. What I received in the comment section of that video, because Jamaicans don't like negativity of any sort. They don't like negativity about their island. As messed up as things are, as high as the crime rate is and all that stuff, they will deny. You don't know what you're talking about. You never lived there before, blah, blah, blah. They would go on and on. Eventually, I just shut down that channel because I wasn't reaching the audience that I wanted to. I was trying to reach out to people like you that are watching and not Jamaicans, but as it were, the algorithm, Jamaicans were watching it and they were pushing back on my truth. because my experiences had to do with my experiences and not overall. You know, when I say the crime rate out there is ridiculous, I'm talking about 1,000 murders a year. 1,000 a year on an island with barely 3 million people. Metro Atlanta has 4 million. Can you imagine in any metropolitan city that's the size of Jamaica that we would have 1,000 murders a month and not have the National Guard in and not have, like, it would be a big deal. The fact that they discount either the number or the danger is ridiculous. And that's the pushback that I used to get. But you can't ignore the numbers. You can't. They're there, black and white. I remember one year I was there, it was 1,300. The average is 1,000, but it got up to 1,300 one year. A year. Now, does that happen to foreigners and tourists and all that stuff? No, not really. But it doesn't mean it can't. The fact that they have, when I said, you know, gates and all that stuff, they have grill. So they have grill is basically a rebar that a welder will put together and all that stuff, and it's like a security gate or a security what would be. It's basically you're putting rebar on front of your window so people can't break in. You're putting rebar on your front door so people can't break in. Everybody, and they call it grill. Everybody has grill in Jamaica. Everybody. So if it's so safe, why do you need grills? Why do you need those dogs that are in your yard barking like, you know, little mutts that they are? You know, why do you need all the security if it's so safe? I don't have grills here where I live. I have cameras now, but they're not really necessary. And I didn't have cameras on my other house. Never got broken into, never had a burglary, never had, you know, somebody come in to my yard without permission. Like, I don't know. Again, not to get too deep into that, because that's the discussion that that's some points that I will take up when I get further into this video. But let me tell you about some of these situations and experiences, and it's going to be kind of, it's not going to be succinct. I'm not going to go year by year. I'm not going to go decade by decade and, you know, do it all in order or anything like that. I'm just going to touch on various experiences and various things that come to my mind as I'm telling the story. I don't have a script, so I'm not reading you like, you know, like the scripted story and blah 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 and there's an end. I don't know when this video will end, but I'm just going to tell you all the different experiences as they come to my brain. All right, time to get serious here. I don't even know where to start. Let me start from the beginning. When I first moved down there, as I said, I had accumulated really no savings. What I had was money from having sold the house. So I had about 30,000, something like that. There was a money market account at this place, JMMB, back then, they were kind of a startup. I think they were only around at that point for a couple, 2 or 3 years. And they were offering a really, really attractive interest rate on money. So I put, how much was it? I think I put 10 grand. I put 10 grand into one of their money market accounts, like right from the get-go. And it was paying 27%. Sorry, my bad, 32%. But after tax, you know, like they have GCT, government tax, it was 27% that I netted of that 10 grand. So it was a really, really attractive situation to have money in an account back then. So I put that money in there, and I ended up getting a car. I remember I definitely knew I needed a car because I wasn't going to take these route taxis. These route taxi drivers drive crazy. In fact, driving in Jamaica is crazy anyway, but I acclimated relatively quickly. I was not interested in a right-hand drive car. I just wasn't. Because they drive on the opposite side of the road and their steering wheel's on the opposite side of the car and all that stuff, and it wasn't comfortable for me. So I was more comfortable driving what I'm used to, left-hand side, right? Left-hand drive side. And I finally tracked down, sorry, my bad, skipped ahead again. When I first got there, I bought a van because I thought I was going to work. I thought, I could just take my work and move it down there, and which is one of the reasons that I packed the tools and all that stuff. And so I needed a van in order to have a covered, unlike a truck where it's open, I needed a covered type of secure vehicle. So I bought this van. And I don't remember what I spent on the van, but it wasn't a whole lot. It was a few thousand, I don't know, $3,000, $4,000 on this van. And I took out the seats of this van and I started to try and work. One of the ways that I managed to do advertising, I thought to myself, if I put an ad in the Gleaner, on the Sunday Gleaner, a lot of eyes will go on it, but then it'll get thrown away. So I have 4 editions in a month that I can pay for, but then it keeps on going away. People don't keep the newspaper. So I decided not to do that. What I decided to do is I decided that I was going to make... So in Ocho Rios, oh, and by the way, that's where I picked to live. And not proper, just outside of Ocho Rios. There's a lot of shops, there are a lot of tourist shops in Ocho Rios. And there was this one shop, souvenir shop, who had kind of a crappy looking sidewalk in front, with a couple of posts in the front. And I offered to tile that sidewalk, that entranceway into that shop for the guy. And there's a lot of Indians that own things down there. And, Indians don't want to spend money. And I went in there and I'm like, hey, I want to tile your entrance, make it beautiful, make it more attractive for people to come in here when they see the entrance. He's like, no, I'm not interested, I'm not interested. I'm like, well, how do you know? Well, the boss wouldn't allow, the boss is going to say no, the boss is going to say no. Excuse me, I'm not charging you, I'm going to do this for free. You're going to do it for free? And I'm like, yeah, for free. Okay, go ahead and do it. And I'm like, I thought you had to ask the boss. Oh, no, it's okay, go ahead and do it. I thought it was funny. So my idea was here's the caveat. I will tile the entrance for free, but I'm going to be putting my name and phone number in tiles on the front of this tile job that I do. So I went to Kingston and I bought letters and numbers, and I just put on the front of there, tile by Bob, and then I put my number. The irony is, to this day, 22, 24 years later, that job is still there. That tile is still out in front of that shop. Although that shop has been converted into a restaurant, and they put some green fake, they put some, that fake green stuff that you can put down, looks like grass. They put that over it, and then they put chairs and stuff like that. So my tile job is currently covered up. But I knew that Jamaicans are snoopy. And I knew that watching a white guy tiled in the broad daylight would be a curiosity, which would then attract potential customers. This tile job on a good day would take me 2 days, and maybe a couple hours on a third day. But I bled it out for a week. I literally did not go out there and start working until about 4:30 in the afternoon, because I wanted all the traffic, the foot traffic of people coming off of work. And that's what happened. And, I'd have a crowd around me watching me doing my tile work, out in the late afternoon. And then the next day I'd go out there and, it just went on and on. And sure enough, I got a couple customers out of just being out there. I got this one Rasta guy who had a house in Trelawney that he was building. And Trelawney is about, it's a parish. So out in Falmouth area, he was building a house out there and he needed some tile work done. And then along comes this other guy who actually owned a tour company at the time, Maitland Walker. He was also a JP. So he had a great house, and he saw me working there, and he offered, some work for me, and I ended up being becoming friends with him. So that was a really good connection. And I did some work for him. During one of the visits that I had with Mr. Walker, we were sitting out on his veranda one day, and he said to me, like, Bob, how long have you been here? And I've been here for like 6 months at the time. I've been here like 6 months. You know, oh, you got some girls you deal with? And I'm like, yeah, I got some girls. It's like, well, here's the thing. You're not really working legally. Like, you don't have a work permit to do what you're doing. I'm like, no, I'm just kind of doing this off the cuff. I don't need the money. It's just something to do. And he said, if one of these girls gets vexed with you, vex, meaning upset with you, they could turn tail and turn you into immigration. And you would be shipped back home. You would be deported because you're working here illegally. I'm like, ooh, good point. Ooh, my God. So he was putting the fear in me so that he could get my tile saw, because I had a small wet saw that I had bought at Home Depot and had it shipped over. And he wanted that tile saw, which was kind of funny because, you know, didn't really see it at that time. I just saw that threat loom above me, and I didn't want to get deported. Because what that would have meant to me is I would have, all my stuff in my apartment, you know, my car, all that stuff I couldn't get back to because I would have been deported. And so I'm like, yeah, it's a good idea. I probably shouldn't be doing this work, you know. And he's like, okay. So what are you going to do with your, he called it a machine. So what are you going to do with your tile machine? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, if you want to sell it to me, I'll buy it. And so he actually bought it for the same money I spent on it. I think it was $300 that I spent on it. So he gave me the $300 for the saw. No big deal. Now I don't need the van. And so I ended up finding, it took a while, but I found a car in Kingston that somebody was selling. That was a Nissan Sentra. It was a 95. It was a 95 Nissan Sentra, left-hand drive, automatic. I'm not doing, no, my bad. Because it was a left-hand drive, I could drive a stick. It was a stick. It was a 5-speed. I couldn't do a stick with my left hand. Sitting on the right side of the car, that wasn't going to happen. So I lucked out and I got this car, and it was like my midlife crisis car, because I was 40, I was 41 at the time. So that was a little sports car. In my mind, it was a sports car. I used to take chances in that car. As I said, I acclimated to the driving very, very well, especially with left-hand drive car. And I took a lot of chances. Oh my God. You know, overtaking, as they say, you know, passing somebody, passing people. I would, at nighttime, you know, you have a long blind road that you're going, and you want to pass somebody, but you're not comfortable because you can't see around to see if there's another car coming. And I used to look at the telephone wires or the power lines, and I used to watch the power lines for lights, because the lights would reflect on the power lines to know if there's an oncoming car. And I took a lot of chances just by looking at those power lines. And I remember one time I was passing, I think it was like 2 or 3 cars and a big truck. And I passed the 2 or 3 cars, and I was going the fastest speed I could at the time. And I was almost past the truck, and I saw this oncoming car. And when I tell you I was probably not more than a foot from hitting that guy, let me tell you, I was not more than a foot. That scared me to slow down somewhat, but I still took a lot of chances. I took a lot of chances. I remember one time I was driving through Rockabessa, another town on the seaside area before Road 2000 was built, and it was really, really thin area. And me and this other guy were driving too close to the middle line, and we did a high five. Bam! Our mirrors. So both of our mirrors slapped against each other like a high five. And it didn't destroy my mirror, but it kind of screwed it up a little bit. We didn't stop. Neither one of us stopped. We just kept going. Oh my God. If I have a guardian angel, that guardian angel was definitely in if not the passenger seat, in the back seat, taking care of me, because I did some crazy driving in Jamaica. I drove like they drove. I acclimated that well. And especially with a 5-speed, and especially in my midlife crisis, I was taking a lot of chances. But I drove a lot. I drove that island. I went all the way around Portland up to Yalis into, Kingston and Old Harbor, and all the way back around again, all the way to Sablamar and Negril and Lucy and Montego Bay, and yeah, I and even the interior. I used to go over Flatbridge to get to Kingston before I call it the Beijing Highway that exists now. Beijing Highway because the Chinese built it. They made a deal with the government. That's a whole different. That's a whole different. I could talk about that too. But yeah, I took a lot of chances. Especially Mount Rasa back in the day, when that was the only way to get to the south side to Kingston. From Ocho Rios. You go up Fern Gully and go through. Oh, those drives. Oh my God. And there were times where a truck would be broke down going up Mount Rasa to get to the other side. And you knew that if a truck was broke down, you might as well just turn around and go back home. Because it would take hours and hours and hours for that truck to get out of the way. Traffic would, it was a mess. They don't have the modern common sense to figure out that there's a problem and then solve it. Even Flatbridge. If anybody knows anything about Flatbridge, it's been there for a long ass time. I'm going to push to say at least maybe 50, 80 years Flatbridge has been there. Maybe longer. If there's a problem anywhere near Flatbridge, you're in trouble. You may as well turn around too. If Flatbridge is flooded out, which it does from time to time because a river runs through it, you're not passing through it, because otherwise you could just get pushed into the water below. And to be fair, it's not really a bridge. A bridge would be going like this over the water and not almost level with it. And that's what Flatbridge was about. And I can't figure out for the life of me as many problems that exist with having that, which is the only route to get over there back then, unless you went the long way. You could, arguably you could go up through Mandeville, or you could go up through Portland, and still make it over. But I'm just saying, like, why wouldn't you build a proper bridge so you wouldn't have those issues? You wouldn't have one car passing by or one lane of traffic. Flatbridge is one lane. Only one set of cars can go by at a time. The other side has to wait. It's just so archaic and idiotic to still have that there. And then after Road 2000 got built, they kind of then beget, as I said, Beijing Highway, and now you have a proper highway going, but you got to pay to go over it. Back then, when I first went out there before Road 2000, potholes, oh my God. Jamaica invented what a pothole was. They were everywhere. And that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is usually it's a lot of volcanic rock that's embedded into those potholes. So you were almost guaranteed to get a flat tire. When we rented a car, before I bought my car, when me and my friend rented a car, we had quite a few flat tires. And they will drive a tire till it's bald and the threads are showing. Very conservative. Jamaicans don't throw away nothing. Everything is usable until it's not. Everything is usable until it's not. And I adopted that mentality. I remember my toilet was leaking at one point, and I knew what it was. I knew why it was leaking. It was a little diaphragm. It's like a rubber. It's like a rubber piece that goes on top of the ball cock, and there's 4 screws that hold where the ball cock is in, where it goes up and down in the toilet. That diaphragm keeps water from leaking out. And I needed a new diaphragm, and I knew that, but I wasn't going to spend the money. And one day I was out snorkeling, and I was next to a hotel where I was snorkeling at, and somebody threw out a ball cock. Like they just threw it out into the water, and I'm like, oh, snap. And so I put it in my diving bag and I brought it home. And I reused the diaphragm. I took out the 4 screws that were a little bit rusted, and I took out the diaphragm, took out mine, and I put that diaphragm in there. And it was a small potato thing. I could have gone to the hardware store and bought another whole ball cock for probably 200 or 300 Jamaican dollars. But I was in that mentality of nothing goes to waste. So I replaced and fixed my leaky toilet. Then I took the ball, that black ball of the ball cock, and I took that black ball and I painted it orange, and that became my diving bobber. Like when I went fishing, when I went spear fishing and all that stuff, and I had a bag of fish, you know, you want that bag to float. And so that became my float. And then I took the rod of that ball cock and I made that into a spear for my spear gun. Nothing goes to waste. Yeah, nothing goes to waste. What I realized pretty quickly is that I was in a retirement phase. Remember, I was down there 6 months before I gave up on the work mode. So what do I do? What do I do exactly with my days? I don't know what to do. I'm fidgety. So I started making my own furniture. They have a big store there called Quartz. And you can go to Quartz and get a couch and table and dining room set and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's not that I couldn't afford to buy all that stuff, but it's like, why? When I have the ability to build it myself. So that became my job. That became my spare time, as I would, especially on rainy days where I couldn't go diving. I ended up building my coffee table, and I tiled the coffee table, and then I built my dining room table and I tiled that, and I built a bookcase, and I built my bed, like literally the bed, the frame. I put 3 drawers up underneath it, sliding drawers, so I'd have a chest of drawers under my bed. I consolidated, and I just went on this building spree so I'd have something to do. It was at a point where it's like I felt retired, but I didn't like it. Like I didn't like it at all. So I just started doing stuff. I remember picking up bamboo off the side of the road and bringing it home. And this is an actual ashtray. Like I think I made probably half a dozen ashtrays for myself. And so what I did is I just cut off the thicker part. Well, bamboo's pretty thick there anyway, and I cut off the thick part of the bamboo from the bottom, right where the transitions are at. And then I put glue on the inside, and then I coated the glue with sand and made it an ashtray that I still use today. I just started making stuff. Another thing I started making is toothbrush holder / pen and pencil holder out of bamboo. So as you can see, 3 different sizes that I sliced at like a 45-degree angle. And then I put plywood, I glued plywood, thin plywood to the bottom so I could bring all 3 of them together, and then I glued the bottom of the bamboo onto the plywood. And then I just made these holders. And I actually still have 3. I have 3 of these. I probably made a dozen, and I've given away all the other ones over the years. But yeah, just something to do. You know, I was bored. And I didn't need money. You know, it wasn't a matter of, oh crap, I can't work, because I didn't need the money. But I remember when I packed my barrels, that hustle mentality from my childhood and growing up and all that stuff, you know, self-preservation. I'm like, how do I make $1? How do I go to Jamaica and make $1 off the tourists or off anybody for that matter? And I was at a dollar store back here at one point, and I saw these little fans, and I thought to myself, you know, it's kind of hot in Jamaica, especially in the summer. I bet these fans would go over well. And they happen to be the Jamaica colors. Yeah. Green, black, and gold. It happened to be that, and they were $1. So I went to this chain of dollar stores and I bought out all of them in that store, and then I drove 10 miles and I went to that store and bought out all of those, and I bought out all. I ended up with like 120 of these fans. Let me show you. This is kind of funny. I kept like 2 or 3. I still have 2 or 3 of them to this day. They have a little kickstand so you can put them on a table. And I think there are 2 AA batteries that go in them. And then they have this little neck string that has an adjustable thing on it, so you can have it around your neck and, you know, like hanging it right here to blow up at you, or just put it on a table. And so I was selling these, I think for, it was double the money. I spent $1 on them and I was selling them for, I think $3. I think I was selling them for like $3 at that time. The problem was trying to sell them to tourists, because tourists in Jamaica are bombarded. They want to braid your hair, they want to sell you ganja, they want to do all this stuff, and here I am, a white guy, trying to sell them these fans, and it wasn't going over too well. What I realized was that the natives would buy these fans, because when they're going to church, they don't have air conditioning, and yeah, they want to go to church and have the fan blowing at them. So yeah, that became a hot item for the natives, ironically, not for the tourists. And if I'm not mistaken, I had a stamp. I don't have them on these, but I had a stamp made in like cursive that said Jamaica, and I stamped all these fans that were actually produced, I don't know, probably in China, that I bought in the United States, that I stamped Jamaica on them. So when I sold them, they're like, oh, made in Jamaica. No, they weren't made in Jamaica. But they do that with a lot of touristy type of stuff in Jamaica anyway. I didn't sell, I brought with me 120 of those fans, and I couldn't sell them. A friend of mine, me and her went on a road trip, and we went to Negril, and we were trying to get rid of these fans. Like, they weren't selling very well in Ocho Rios, so we ended up going to Negril and trying to sell them there. I think we sold maybe 4 or 5. I don't remember what happened to the vast amount of them, but I do remember I had a couple of beggars when I first moved down there. When I say beggars, you know, hey, I'm hungry, you know, I'm starving, can you give me some money, and this and that, da-da-da. And they were probably, you know, alcoholics, just wanted money for a drink or whatever. And that happens a lot to tourists down there. They get begged from people. And I had this one little Rasta kid, and then I had Molehead. I call him Molehead because he had a mole right there on his forehead. And I think there was a third one, if I'm not mistaken. And so I gave them some of those fans. And this is part of the cultural thing that some of the stories I want to talk about have a lesson attached to them. I wanted to help these guys out and also help myself. So I told them, hey, the ones that I trusted the most, I gave 20 fans to. The other one, my other beggar, I gave 10 fans to. And then the one I trusted the least, I gave 5. And I said, go out and sell those for anything, any amount that you want to sell them for, go and sell them. But I want, what was the rate back then? It was like 50 to 1 by that time, 48, 50 to 1. So I wanted at least 120 Jamaican dollars, which would have better than doubled my money. So they could go out and sell them for 200 or 300 if they want to. But they had to bring me back 120. And when they did that, I would double their inventory. So the one I gave 20 to, I would have given 40 to the next time once he handed me my money. The one I gave 10 to, I would have given 20 to, and it would have benefited everybody. The person that bought the fan, the guy who sold it to him, and then it would have benefited me on top because I would have doubled my money. Do you know, after that first set of fans that I gave away, I never saw those guys again? Never saw them again. I never saw my money. All those fans that I gave away, the 20, the 10, and the 5, those were 35 fans that I never saw again, and I never saw the money for them. Jamaicans have this mentality of now. now. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year. They're not thinking ahead. They get upset with the Chinese people because the Chinese seem to have this family-orientated, money-making mentality. But what they don't realize is that the Chinese never think about, they're always thinking in terms of next generation. They're always thinking way, way ahead. Jamaicans don't. They think about here and now. Screw tomorrow. I need money now. And that's how these three guys shot themselves in the foot, because they could have, you know, if they did the right thing, I would have gone back to the US and I would have collected more fans. Or I had little calculators at the time too that I was going to try and sell. Because remember, cell phones didn't exist, so people needed a calculator, especially tourists, to do the conversion when they're spending money. There was one point, I told you I was going to skip around. There was one point where I needed, when I had the van, I needed speakers for the van. And those speakers needed to be custom made to fit up under the seat. So I went to the stereo place, this place that literally just delved in stereo type equipment. And I asked the guy if he could make me some speakers, and he said, sure. Give me the size, give me the dimensions. And I wrote down the dimensions. I said, how much to make my speakers? And he said, $3 grand. And I said, okay, $3 grand, that's a good price. When should I come back? And he said, you know, come back next week. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I was very, very excited because these little speakers, and I still have them. I could probably show them to you, but I still have them today. They were going to be, you know, the little carpeted on the outside and all that stuff. They were going to be really cool looking. And I was very, very excited. So I went back a week later to go retrieve my speakers, and he's like, oh, yeah. So he went in the back of the shop, came back out, and I looked at him. I'm like, oh, snap. Those are better than I expected. They looked really nice. Had the covers on them. It was just exactly what I wanted. And so I pulled out my money and all that stuff, and then he started talking, and he's like, yeah, you see the little tweeters that I have up there yeah, I see the tweeters. Yeah. He's like, yeah. He said, you know, yeah, I got to charge you a little extra, you know, for those. You know, they're really difficult to solder the wires. But he went into this little explanation about how these tweeters were going to be extra. And I said, how much are you talking about? Like we agreed on a price, $3 grand. Yeah, I got to charge you 300 extra. 300 extra. Let me ask you this. How many times have you built a speaker without a tweeter? He's like, he didn't have an answer. He's like, I've never really built a tweeter or a speaker without a tweeter. So then why are you trying to charge me something that would be normal and that we agreed on to begin with? Anyway, I don't want to argue with you. Let me tell you this. I know Mr. Walker, Maitland Walker. He owns a tour company. He's got buses. He's got a bunch of cars that he rents out, etc., etc. My friend had just moved down here from America, and he just bought an F-150, and he's going to need some work done. I have a lot of referrals that I can send you. So I'm going to give you the 300 that you asked for, which at that time amounted to $5. But if you take up that money, you'll never see me again. You'll never get a referral from me. I'll never deal with you ever again. So I just counted out the money, put it on the table. He looked down at it, and almost without hesitation, despite what I had said, he picked it up. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Bye. Never see you again. The irony is, within, I think, that first couple months that I owned that van, as I said before, I sold the van because I couldn't work anymore because I didn't want to get turned into immigration. That's when I bought the Nissan. And when I bought the Nissan, I needed to swap out the stereo, the radio. And there's another stereo place right down the alley. You have to pass by him first to get to the other stereo place. So I passed by in my Nissan, and I honked the horn, and he came to the window, waved at him, and then I pointed at the next man. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going down to him. Here's my new car. You just lost business for life. You know, just kind of rubbing it into his nose a little bit. And then I went down, and sure enough, I had that work done over there. They just don't think ahead. They're just so damn greedy. They just don't think of the long term. It's just short term they think about. They don't think about the possibility of, you know, I could do a hustle. I could make more money if I act right. And they just don't act right. And I've seen that time and time and again. That is not an anomaly. That's kind of normal mindset there. And you can't really count. You can't count on people, you know, to even if there's a motivation to do something. Yeah, ma, me soon come. Yeah, me soon come. Means nothing. It's like, oh, I'm on my way. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days? There is no definition to soon come. It's island time. When they get there, they get there. Which is contradictory to how we work here, because we're very much on time and apologize profusely if we're 5 minutes late. But it's island time. And I get that, and I got accustomed to that. But there's no push forward. You know, people talk about third world country, and that was derogatory after some years. And so then they started saying developing country. They've been developing 3 times longer than we have. When are you going to stop developing? Or when are you going to start, as it were, developing your country to make it better? The issue becomes, if they wanted to, they would. So if they really wanted to stop mowing their lawn with a machete and start using a weed whacker or a lawnmower, hello, they would. But they like using the machete to cut their bush and cut their grass and all that stuff. You know, a lot of extra work, totally unnecessary, but that's what they like. That's what they're accustomed to. There's a lot of different little instances and stories and things that I can talk about, and I'm going to try and whittle it down to some of the little bit more entertaining ones. You know, I talked about the driving there, you know, and the taxis and all that stuff, and oh my God, there's so many stories I could tell you about doing kind of the explorations that I did on driving, and how it was difficult to get directions, because there's hardly any street names unless you go into Kingston or Montego Bay. There's not really street names, and so it's like, oh yeah, you turn left there, so turn right there, so, you know, there, so. There's a lot of lingo, there's a lot of patois that you have to become accustomed to. There's a lot of, you know, they speak English, but it's patois. And so if you don't know some of the terminology, if you don't know some of the wordage, if you don't know some of the British dialect that they inherited from the British, having colonized them for, you know, 400 years, then you're kind of lost. I remember one time with my car, I had a problem with it, and I drove up to this mechanic. He's like, yo, fling your bonnet. I didn't know he was talking to me. I'm like, I just ignored it. He's like, yo, what mister? Fling your bonnet there. And I'm like, what is this guy saying? Like, I didn't even understand the wordage. The term would have still boggled my brain. It's like, what is he talking about? And he came over, and he came over and he popped my hood. Fling your bonnet means pop your hood. My head exploded. I'm like, okay, it's the British term. Your bonnet is your hood. But I didn't know that. The patois alone can mess you up, but then, like I said, the verbiage of how they translate over from the British, and yeah, it's a bit confusing. And there's a lot of terminology there. There's a lot of history there too. Bumbaclat, rasclat, you know, and all these terms that they weren't allowed to cuss back in the British colonial times. They weren't allowed to cuss, so they made up their own words that mean nothing to us. But trust me, a Jamaican that cuss you out can use bumbaclat and make it so deep that you know you're being cussed out. Even if you don't understand what he's saying, You have no idea. Blood clot. Like, and it comes from a lot of its derivatives of some things put together, like blood cloth is what they're saying. Blood cloth is like a rag from a woman, you know, that once a month time. But they say blood clot. And you're like, blood clot? That's a medical term. What are they talking about? Like, I got a blood clot? How would you, like, I don't know. It was funny when I first moved down there. It didn't have any power. It didn't have any, the way we cuss has more power, I think. But the way they cuss is a whole different level. And it starts becoming powerful when you hear it enough. And the nuance, how they say it, and in what form and who they're saying it to. Butty boy. Trust me, I've been called that enough times. A derogatory term. Fish. Things like that. Like, a lot of times it's hype. A lot of times what I call peacocking. Let me tell you a story about peacocking that happened to me one time. So that term I just kind of came up with after this incident. It's happened a couple of times. Peacocking. So the peacock spreads its feathers up for whatever reason. Don't really know, but it spreads its feathers up like that. But it's just an innocent, harmless bird at the end, right? So the peacocking that happens there is everybody wants to be a bad man. Everybody wants to be a tough guy. They want you to think they're a tough guy. And for that reason, sometimes when controversy happens, flares up or whatever, they do this peacocking thing where they want to come across as being a bad man. And I was with a friend of mine, and we were chit-chatting in a car, and there's a little area. It's a public street. It's not a taxi space per se, legally. It's a public street. But this little, next to the sidewalk in Ocho Rios, for the most part was used by taxis to park up their cars. But the space was open, and I just pulled into it because I didn't care. I didn't know. It doesn't matter. So her and I were chit-chatting. We were talking. And so this guy that had this bus came over to me, and it wasn't even like he was getting into that space. It was just that I was taking up that space, I guess, for somebody else. So he came up to me and he's like, "Yo, you can't park here, so." I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he started peacocking. He started, you know, acting all tough and everything. I'm like, "Where's your badge? You're not a cop. Get out of here." So he left and he went back over to his van and he got a machete, as they call it. And I happen to have one in my back seat on the floorboard. In Jamaica, you're allowed to carry a machete if you're a farmer. Like, you could walk down the road carrying a machete in your hand and nobody's going to say anything. Even the police don't really care because you're a farmer. But it's kind of otherwise a weapon. And because I didn't have an ability to own a gun there, that's a whole nother topic and subject. But I didn't have an ability to own a gun there. The only thing I could have is I armed myself with a folding knife that I used to practice on banana trees. I used to take my folding knife and be like 10 feet away or 15 feet away, and I would throw it over and over again so that I would get accustomed to being able to throw a knife and be able to hit my target with the blade and not the handle. And then I had a fishing knife that I carried in a sheath on the side of my belt, because it's all I could do to protect myself. But I had a small little 18-inch long machete in the back floorboard that I carried. So it was a small one, but I pulled it out and I'm like, yeah, I got one too, because he was waving it around like he was going to do me some harm. And so at a certain point, I pulled out my camera. I have a diving camera, a yellow diving camera, and I pulled out my camera and I was pretending I was taking this picture. There was no film in it. No, sorry, my bad. The film was already ruined or something, I don't remember. But it was useless, or the camera wasn't functional. All I remember was it freaked him out, and so he called the police. Jamaicans like drama, if it's not theirs. They love other people's drama. I call it OPP, other people's problems. And everybody in the crowd will chime in on their take on the drama. No matter what the real circumstances are, shit, they'll make stuff in their head. And they will chime in, oh yeah, you know, blah, blah, blah. And you'll have, and I did. It ended up attracting this big crowd. The police came over and they're like, you're not allowed to take pictures of people, and that's not legal here, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's a tourist area. Everybody has cameras. Like, if people get in a picture that you're taking a picture of somebody else, but they happen to be in it, like, what are you talking about? So anyway, all this drama was circulating amongst the crowd that had gathered that was absolutely none of their business whatsoever. That's another thing too, what I talked about OPP, other people's problems. If something else is happening down the road and they're on their way home, they'll stop what they're doing. They won't go home. They'll go down the road to get involved in that drama and make sure they're heard about the drama that has nothing to do with them. And it gathered a crowd, and the cops were asking me if I had a weapon, and I'm like, I got this little machete back there or whatever. And so the crowd was getting a little out of hand. I think toward me. I don't know exactly. All I know is that the cops were like, you know, it's getting kind of crazy out here. We're going to go over to the cop shop, and we're going to drive you over there. So me and my friend were told to sit in the back seat of my car as the cop drove us over to the cop shop. And they did a thorough search. When I say thorough, of my car, looking for this gun, because apparently the guy told him that I had a gun that I had pulled, which I didn't. And they did a thorough search on my car. Like, they even lifted the hood and was, you know, opening up, you know, the air filter area. They were looking everywhere for this supposed... I'm like, how would I have hidden this one? Even if I had one that I pulled on this guy, how would I have gotten out of my car, popped the hood, and then hid it somewhere in the engine compartment? Like, that was so crazy. But I've had that peacocking happen, and eventually they let us go. No big deal, whatever. It happened another time. I was over at Mother's, and I was just sitting minding my own business, looking at my phone, and this kid came up to me, and I think he was kind of tweaking or whatever, but he had a small knife in his hand, and he was telling me, you know, well, so he came up to me at first, and he had a phone in his hand. He's like, you know, give me some money for this phone. I'm like, I don't need a phone. Yeah, I need some money. Here's a phone. You know, give me some money for the phone. I'm like, I don't need a phone. I've got one right in my hand. Like, what are you talking about? And then he pulled out a knife. I'm like, ooh, things are getting serious here. And so I had my fishing knife on the side, and I had my folding knife in my pocket. And I called the police because he freaked out after I stood up and pulled out my knife. He freaked out and ran away. And I called the police, and the cop shop wasn't far away. It was like a city block away. I waited it was probably 15 minutes before the cops showed up. Wham da. I'm like, excuse me? Like, where is he? He's in Jamaica? No, this guy's probably in Cuba by now. You guys took so long to get here, he's long gone. Like, that was a totally useless police call. A call that I made to the police. If you're looking for the police to protect you in Jamaica, that's not going to happen. Especially at nighttime. Especially at nighttime. On the other hand, I've never received a ticket in Jamaica, because you can always pay off a cop. And trust me, I've had so many instances where if I'm speeding, a lot of times I'm not, if I'm speeding, if I'm doing this or I'm doing that and they pull me over, the usual hint is, you know, hey, I'm kind of hungry, can you do something for me? Hey, I'm kind of thirsty, can you buy me a drink? And they don't mean literally buy you a drink. They mean, hey, you won't get this ticket if you give me some money. So at one point, I used to have my cop money. My cop money was in my ashtray because I didn't want to pull out my real money and show them that I had more. So to get out of a ticket, whether it was legit or not, really didn't matter. I had my cop money, and my cop money was in the ashtray, and it was usually a $1,000 bill, which at that time was about, what was the math on that? 1,000 would have been about 17 bucks. So, but unbeknownst to me, because that skin tax was in my brain. Most locals that would pay off a cop would be a couple hundred, maybe 500 at the most. But here I was spoiling the pot with $1,000 cop money in my ashtray. So I didn't have to pull out my wad of cash out of my money. I'm like, I just pull out, this is all I have. Can you deal with it? Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. So then we would do the trade-off. Like, they would hand me my paperwork back, and at the same time, I would slip them the money. So there have been tickets that have been somewhat legit, and sometimes it's not legit at all. Sometimes they just pull you over. They got the little roadblock going on. They wave you down. Again, I'm a foreign. And so they're like, ooh, this guy's got money. Let's wave him down. It's like, oh, yeah, let me see your paperwork, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, yeah, you were going a little fast there, Their radar doesn't work. They're getting a lot of their equipment from Miami, like secondhand, third-hand equipment from other states. Their radar guns that they have, for the most part, don't work. So they're saying, oh, yeah, you were going 80 and a 60, but that 80 is stuck in that radar gun, or they just had somebody that they knew go 80 and they just kept it there, right? And so when they show you the radar gun, I ask for a timestamp, and they don't want to show it. So it wasn't me, it was somebody else. The only one time that I got a legit ticket, I remember a friend of mine and her baby, I think he was probably a year or 2 years old at that time, was sitting in the front seat, and we were going through Port Maria. And just on the other side of the bridge of Port Maria was a cop sitting there. And it pulled me over because she was holding her kid in the front seat, where she should have been in the back seat. It's not even like here where you have to have a child seat. It's just that she should have been in the back seat with that kid, not in the front seat. And I think that fine was $500. And I was okay with paying it. I got onto her because she knew and I didn't. I'm like, why didn't you tell? Like, you should have known that, So there's that. I think the only time that I got a ticket that I even fought that was legit was kind of a shit show. Like, I went to court on it, and it took so long. It took like the whole day before they even called my name. And at the end of it, it wasn't even worth fighting. Like, all the buffoonery that goes on in the court system there, and putting things off and blah, 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 it wasn't even worth it. I ended up just paying whatever it was at that point. But the only legit ticket, and that was probably, if my memory serves me, wasn't even a legit ticket. That was a cop that was just pissed off that I didn't give him a bribe. So he wrote me a legit ticket that wasn't legit, if that makes sense. The weird thing is, like, everything there has to be, you have to have that stamp, and you have to have the JP sign on this, and you have to have this done and that done, and blah, blah, blah. Everything's got to be in order. But then on the same token, the rules don't apply. You could pee on the side of the road, and you could, I've seen front end loaders with people piling up on it, driving it down the road, like on top of a bus or whatever. Some of the stuff that would be highly illegal to do here is just like no big deal there. But then when you get into the system, everything has to be just so, and this wasn't done right and that wasn't done right. It could drive you crazy. When I was getting mail down there at a certain point, when I first went there, even the mail, they had boxes, when you walked up to the desk, they had some boxes behind them. And they didn't even put in alphabetical order your name. So if you're going to go collect your mail, well, a couple of things, because they take so long to do anything. If there's 3 people or less, I will stand in line to get my mail. I'll walk by there. There's 3 people or 2? Okay, I'll stand in line because I know I got 20, 30 minutes to stand there. 20, 30 minutes to stand there in line with 2 people ahead of me. But if there's 3 or more, I'm not stopping because I know I got an hour or longer to wait in line just to pick up my mail. And then when they go through it, my last name starts with a D. And you would think ABC would be in one box, DEF would be in another. No. They don't even... Some of the frustration there, the frustration I would run into really would be a drag at a certain point. It would be a drag. There was a point where that machete I talked about, I wanted to sharpen it, right? They don't sell a sharpened machete. You got to go do it yourself. And as they do it with a file. I'm not going to sit there for an hour and try and take this little file and file a machete. Are you kidding me? Hell no. The easiest way to do that is a bench grinder. Plug it into the wall, you know, it has a wheel on it, and zoop, zoop, like in less than a minute you sharpen a machete. So I went on a search for a bench grinder, and unfortunately most of the stores there, most of the hardware stores, everything's locked up. So you walk into the front and they got a cage right there where they have a little opening, and you're talking through, you know, like this cage to the person, and all the tools are up above them and in the back. And so they go get what you want and bring it out to you, and then you pay for it. So you can't just look around. So I would arbitrarily go by hardware stores on these little travels I would go on. Excuse me, miss, do you have a bench grinder? You have a bench grinder in there? And she's just sitting in that chair. No. I'm like, okay, thanks. Move on to the next one. By about the third hardware store, it dawned on me, maybe they don't know what a bench grinder is. So by the fourth store, I would go in, excuse me, miss, you got a bench grinder in there? It's like, no. Do you know what a bench grinder is? No. Oh my God. Like I would be a cartoon, you would see steam coming out of my ears. How are you going to tell me you don't have a bench grinder when you don't even know what I'm talking about? And then some things are called different. Some things they just make up something different. Like, for example, you know, an avocado is a pear. No, a pear is a pear. An avocado is a whole different thing. But no, they call it a pear. So if you don't know what I'm asking about, here you would say, a bench grinder? What are you talking about? Oh, it's this machine. It's got a wheel on it. It goes around. You plug it in. Oh, yeah, we have one of those. They don't care. Those people are making the same on a Friday when they get paid. That same $2,000 or $3,000 on that Friday when they get paid. If they do good service or bad service, they don't care. Doesn't matter. They could care less. A lot of frustration would happen. And after a while, you acclimate yourself to that and just expect it. And when something goes better or faster, you're appreciative of the fact that it went better or faster. You know, it could be at a restaurant. It could be the piss poor service at a restaurant. Or it could be anything, really. It could be anything. Just daily life is frustrating. And you cannot take your U.S. mentality with you down there. There was a guy I knew down there, and he's like, man, I would like this place a lot better if it was like New York. And I said to him, if it was like New York, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't. I like some of the things that are different. I like not following the rules when I want to. I like being able to speed down the highway and not, you know, like everywhere I go, get a ticket here and there and blah, blah, blah. I like paying off the cops. There's a lot of stuff to be said about that place. But as I started the video with, the people make it bad. Because it's so difficult. It's so difficult to find a real friend. Everybody seems to want something from you. I don't care how they come on to you, because some of it's kind of obvious. Some of it is like, I mean, I can remember stories where, you know, I asked this girl, you know, to go to lunch, invited her to come to lunch, and she brought 2 of her friends. I'm like, I didn't invite your friends. Like, I literally abandoned her. I said, hey, let's meet over at Juicy Patty. And I pulled up and she was there standing along 2 of her friends. I'm like, oh, hell no, I didn't sign up for that. No, I actually got in my car and left. Like, everybody seems to be on a money grab. Everybody seems to want something from you, one way or the other. If they come on strong and ask you straight up, or if they just like go in the back door, sneaky way, try and become your friend because they think either they want something now or they can get something later. It's always about what they can get. Always. I remember one time I was on a little road trip and I went into this bar, and there's a lot of bars there. Little nugget. There are more bars in Jamaica than there are churches, and there's a whole heap of churches. And there's usually a bar next door to a church, which is kind of weird. There's a lot of weirdness with churches there and Christianity and all that stuff and contradictions of such. That's another topic. So I pulled over. I was on this road trip. I wanted a Pepsi. So I walked up to the bartender. I'm like, excuse me, you have, Pepsi in a bottle? And they usually keep them frozen, which is good. So she gets out the Pepsi, and there's this girl sitting at the bar, and she's like, can you buy me a drink? I'm like, hello, I don't even know you. Like, I don't even know you. Buy you a drink? Fuck out of here. And it just, that wears on you too. It's not just a slow process of everything and the buffoonery, the pure buffoonery of some of the stuff that happens there. But the people wear on you. Just over and over and over, trying to get over on you. You'll meet somebody and think, ooh, I met a friend, and you'll have some communication back and forth. And before you know it, grandma's foot got run over by a car and she's in the hospital. They play this sympathy card, and it's a bunch of bullshit. Like, oh, and this happened and that happened and blah, blah, blah. I remember that friend I was talking about, we exchanged stories. See whose story could be better than the next one's. And he was telling me about this girl that he had met and how he didn't even know her that well. And all of a sudden she hit him up and said that she had a death in the family. She got to go to a dead yard and she needs some new shoes to go to the dead yard, yada, yada, yada. Trying to get some money out of him. And he's got sharper edges than I do, and he basically just, told her to go to hell or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, on the day of the dead yard, he sees her in town. Like, she's not at a dead yard, she's in, so I didn't explain. So a dead yard is basically like the after funeral. They have a party, sort of, after a funeral, and so, yeah. Everybody dresses up to the nines. Like, if you want to find a single woman to date, sometimes you go to a dead yard. Yeah, so that, it wears on you. And sometimes it's just straight up rip-off type of situation. I had a property down there at one point that, and some people don't know, and I won't go deep into the story, but basically it's captured land. Captured land is government land that the government it's never going to be developed. There's never going to be a hotel on it. People aren't going to build on it, whatever. It's a lot of it was volcanic rock, and so it's difficult at best to build on. But a friend of mine told me about it, and I signed up, meaning I went out there and I chopped off a little lot of land, about 1/4 acre. So you can't get greedy. Basically, in short term, the government might have 10 acres of land that they aren't going to be used. So they see it advantageous to have this captured land that you can go in there and just chop off a little 1/4 acre for yourself out of this 10 acres. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, you have a community. And the community is now, like, they're building out there and they're buying groceries and everything. So they're adding to the economy of the community. Like, it's beneficial to have that type of situation. And you don't really pay taxes. You pay property tax, but it's very minute. It's hardly anything until your building is finished, which is why a lot of people don't finish out their building, because then they're not taxed on the structure, only the property. So I had this captured land, this little 1/4 acre lot that I had started building on, and I didn't trust. So I was waiting to see that people were not just going to do, like, ply and tin and all this stuff. They were going to actually put block out there. And so after I started seeing, after a couple of years, people actually doing that, and in the meantime, I'm chopping it, I'm keeping it clean and all that stuff, because that's kind of the requirement, that you not let it grow up out of control. This umbrella won't stop turning because of the wind. After a couple years, I saw people starting building on it. I'm like, okay, now it's my turn. Now I believe this is real. And I started building on it. But the problem is, you gotta, you know, like, keep an eye on your stuff. You gotta keep an eye on the block that you put out there, and keep an eye on that and this and that. And it's just difficult because you always feel like you have your head on a swivel. Like, you always have to be turning around looking for somebody to rip you off, which they will. The funny thing is, if you have 100 blocks sitting out there that you had delivered, you spray paint it red, or you spray paint it green. Like, that's the two colors that you can spray paint. That spray paint is most common. And so you spray paint all the outside of the block, you know, a certain color. As if somebody went and stole all your block, you could go claim it as your own because it's your red paint, which is another weird type of thing. Anyway, I get to the point years later where I have a bit of a structure there. It's going to be like a bachelor apartment. So it's going to be 3 of them next to each other. And one big room, 15 by 15, and then the other part would be a bathroom and a kitchen. And I was times 3, and I was going to rent those 3 out and have my house at the top. I got about 50% through with it, and I had a sliding grill on the front of it with the lock on the inside, and they managed to at some point break in, and there was nothing to steal. I had some block in there and a wheelbarrow and a couple of, you know, hoses or whatever. There was really nothing to steal, but they took what they could. So I'm like, all right, I got your number. So I built a veranda both on the front and the back door, and went to the extra time and money and effort to have a veranda built, and I had it grilled off and all that stuff, and I had double lock on the front and the back gate with chains on them and all that stuff. And then I put a camera. A deer camera is basically, you put this on a tree, you wrap it around a tree, and it is activated by motion. So when a deer goes through the woods, it activates and takes a picture that goes on a small SD card. And so then you know this is good hunting ground because a deer is now in that area, so you know that now you can go out there and hunt. That's a deer camera. So I actually bought a deer camera and brought it there, and put it on a little 2x4 into a block on the inside of that sliding gate that now has another lock on it, as well as a veranda. And then I got an alarm system that I made up myself with a car battery and a 12-volt alarm from a car alarm kit that I bought. And the alarm, and then I had a 12-volt light, you know, like very bright light that I had put up there, and a motion detector. And so when you walk by the front of the property, the alarm would go off, the light would go off, and then if there was any motion, the deer camera would capture that. Eventually they broke into both the veranda with the double chain lock and the slider and stole the battery and the camera and everything. You know, they just stole it. And I gave up. There was a time where I was actually building that place, and my mason claimed that I didn't pay him, which I had. And so he stole a couple of items from me in retaliation for not paying him, which I had paid him. Everything is done with receipts. So if you live there, or you think you're going to build there or whatever, make sure, even if you're hiring a contractor or whatever, that you sign off on a receipt, because everything has to do with paper. Like, and paper degrades in Jamaica. Like, the ink will literally disappear in a year or so. So you have to be on point with having paperwork done with everybody. Don't trust. Because if there is a way to get ripped off, they'll figure it out how to do it to you. Anyway, knowing me the way that I do, I wasn't going to deal with that, because if I ever moved my stuff in there, and here's the thing too, people around that neighborhood know who broke into my place and stole that stuff, but they won't rat, because they feel like that bad man that did that's going to come after them if they rat him out. So they won't say a word. Hey, you see what happened? I mean, I seen nothing. Okay. I can't deal with this. Neighbor's got to look after neighbor. If I see my neighbor being broken into, my gun's coming out. Someone's going to get hurt. But they don't do that there. So the best I could do is just exit. So I just sold off the property. I just sold it off. You can't really sell captured land, but you can sell the structure, you see. And so the money that I put into it, at a few $1,000s, is what I ended up selling it for. The money I put into it. So I got my money back on it, but I had plans for that place. And I had it at that point, before I sold it, for about 7 years. For about 7-8 years. And then I had one guy that supposedly knew somebody in the local government, you know, threatened me to take my land. Like, you can't own property here because you're American and blah, blah, blah. And he was making threats to me about how he was going to capture my captured land. So I had to deal with that drama. It's just the people, just, you know, when you think that you have a friend, you have to think twice and 3 times to see what their real motivation is. And like I said, they'll play the heartstrings, you know, oh, this happened to my aunt, this happened to my grandma, blah, 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 you know. The excuses are a dime a dozen, but they're all fake. So when you have the empathy and sympathy that most people would have, they play on that. And you can get sucked in very easy. I see people on YouTube posting videos, you know, this one girl in particular, she moved to Jamaica and she's building this house down there, and I think it's her 2nd year. I think it's her 2nd year, and she talks about how great it is in Jamaica, and she's glad she left America, and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, in 20 years, come back and tell me how you really feel. Yeah, have all those experiences I had and see if it works out the same way you think it's working out. I just don't have any faith in the people. And it could be arguably some of the people I dealt with, but it was a cross-section of people, and I just don't have faith. I feel like, you know, besides all the pretty well-known scamming and all that stuff that goes on, just the interpersonal type of stuff. I could tell you story. This video is very long, but I could go on longer and longer and longer. My friend had been dealing with this girl for a couple of years and had bought her a bunch of stuff in the meantime because he felt bad for her. You know, got her a dining room table, bought her mom a refrigerator, did all this very kind stuff for this woman. And then this woman pulled this BS about how she wants to go into nursing school. And this nursing school theoretically was in Mobay, which was a good ways away from where we were at. So she talked about she was doing practicals at this doctor's office, and you know, she had been sent to go out and get lunch for people, and the $100 that my friend had sent her a couple days earlier was in her purse. And when she came back, the money was gone, and she needed another $100 because the money was gone. And he's like, well, how come you didn't call the police? And like, well, I did, and you know, blah, blah, blah. And you know, and so anyway, he's foolish enough to send her another $100. And so then she's going on about how they're going to get married eventually, and so because they're a fiance, they're allowed in the nursing school to have insurance, you know, health insurance through the school. And it's directly for the student and their direct family. But they also allow for the fiance to have insurance. And my friend didn't have insurance. So he's like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, you know, we should pay the premium on that. You know, so he sent her a premium, an insurance policy purchase, plus a premium for a couple of months to pay for this insurance policy. And I was skeptical of her to begin with. I didn't like her, and he knew I didn't like her. So it was through Blue Cross. And I said to him one day, can we go down to Ochi and check out this Blue Cross place and kind of like, you know, like figure out if this is real or not? He's like, oh, Bob, you just don't like her and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, no, I don't like her. Can you do that for me, please? Pretty please, with sugar on top? So we drove down there, and he begrudgingly went down to the Blue Cross office and went upstairs, and he was there for about 30 minutes. And he came downstairs, and he was beat red. He's like, he was upset. And so basically, the school didn't exist. There's no such thing as that school name that she gave. The whole story about the clinicals where she was at the office never was. There's no Blue Cross policies that are even given out to schools, and there's no school in that name. So the whole thing was a ruse. The whole thing was a total ripoff. She probably took my friend, and I'm just guessing at a number, somewhere between 5 to 8 grand, easily, if not more. U.S. money. I had a little bit of a similar experience with this particular female, where I was friends with her for 5 years, and I did a lot for her. And she would never beg me necessarily, but she would tell me stories to work on my empathy. And she would talk about this and talk about that, and I would want to fix things. So I would do things for her. And this wasn't even like a real relationship. It was just a friendship that we had. But because I felt for her, when she would tell me the stories, I'm a fixer. I'm a guy, and I would want to fix it. And so I would help her out along the way. And that's a whole different video I could go on for 2 or 3 hours on. But at the end result was, she turned on me. She turned on me big time. The whole thing was a ruse. The whole thing was just BS. And she, in a roundabout, very sneaky way, took me for thousands and thousands too. But not in the way my other friend got taken. Because it was a little bit different. End result was the same, but a little bit different. And one of the reasons that I finally just exited why I exited Jamaica altogether was because of her in particular, but because of all those past experiences I've had with people over the years. I just felt like 20 years later, how is another 5 years going to look like? It'd be the same. What's another 20 years? It's going to be the same. I'm still not going to have any friends, not real friends. I'm still not going to have... You know, one of the things that I never did is I never acted like I needed something. I never acted like I was broke or needed help and then leaned on those people. That would have been a good test. But I'm not made of that cloth. I can't hoodwink somebody. You know? I can't even play act like that. But it would have been a good test to find out if somebody is real or not. Or if they're going to take up for you the way you took up for them. Just the people overall. You know, like I said, all the stories that I have, all the drama that they like to you know, like I remember one time I was parking somewhere. This older guy was walking across the street opposite of where I was at. He was walking across the street over by this bank, and I was pulling up into this other lot. And either the way I parked or whatever it was that he took exception to, he decided to turn around and he started chatting at me from across the street. Who are you? Like, why do you even care what I'm doing? It gets to the point, honestly, where it wears on you so much that little things that don't need to be blown up get blown up. And sometimes by me. I remember I was at the airport one time, and I was coming out where the buses are at, and there's an indoor and an outdoor, and they're right next to each other. And so I'm going out the indoor because it was convenient at the time. For whatever reason, it was convenient. And there's a security guard standing right there. And she's like, sir, gotta use this door. I'm like, get out here. And I just continued on out the indoor. And she was having a fit. There was nobody else around. There was no reason, none whatsoever, except I had to follow what she was saying. Like, everybody wants to be a boss there. Just like that old man. Everybody wants to be a boss of you. Mind your own business. That's what we do here. We mind our own damn business. And they can't. They feel like everybody else's business is their business too. Just another thought. There's a lot to add to this because there's so many stories that I have over 20 plus years. But just another thought too. I talked about churches and religion and all that stuff. The hypocrisy that exists in Jamaica is unbelievable. Just to give you a little background, Jamaica always was, but at some point the Spanish and the British and the French split up the Caribbean, which is why you have different islands speaking different language. So the Spanish had Jamaica to begin with for about 80 years. Christopher Columbus got stuck there, etc., etc. You could do a deep dive on Google to figure out the history. But after about 80 years, after Kingston was established, right, in Spanish Town and all these different places it has to do with the Spanish, they were kicked out by the British. And the British owned that island for 300 plus years, close to 400 years. So the British are the reason why you drive on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car. The British is why there's so many churches, and the British is why everybody there, for the most part, are Christian. And the British indoctrinated that slave mentality. They used Christianity and religion against the slaves. You know, you're going to burn in hell and all this other stuff. They just brainwashed them. And so Jamaican people just inherited all of that rubbish about Christianity and all that stuff. The funny thing is, as I said, the hypocrisy that they have of all the 10 commandments that they do, they kind of cherry pick what commandments they're going to follow. As I mentioned in the very beginning of the video, you know, murder is pretty much not allowed, but the murder rate there is humongous. Humongous. Thou shalt not lie with thy neighbor's wife, something to that effect. I'm taking it out of, I'm not saying it exactly right, but they do it all the time. They got side chick, you know, a married man got side chick or 2 or 3. So they don't care about all that stuff. They cherry pick. But the Bati Boy thing, oh my God, they go crazy. You know, Buju Banton went through that years ago with his song. So it's like, man shall not lay with another man. And they sink their teeth into that, and they feel like they're God, and that they have the permission to kill because it's against God. But yet, what are they doing themselves? What do they do? What do their actions speak to? Their actions are contradictory to the Bible in a lot of different ways, because they cherry pick what they like and what they don't like. I just don't like that. You know, if you're going to be like the Buddhists, right? The Buddhists live what they speak. Like, they don't go against their religion. But this whole Christian thing in Jamaica, that brainwashing that was done by the British is, sorry. It's just, it's horrible. I don't like that at all. Anyway, I've done a lot of talking, and I have a lot of experience. And if I've missed anything at all, I'm going to come up and do a part two to my time in Jamaica, because I got a lot of stories. And I'm going to have to go through this video and remember all of the ones I told you so I don't repeat them if I do a part 2. But let me know in the comment section if I should do a part 2 and give you some more stories of my life there. And then also, if you have any experience there, and more so if you have a lot of experience like myself. You know, don't come in the comment section if you've only visited there 2 or 3 times and never had that experience before. Or conversely, if you live there for 2 or 3 years or even 5 years, and you're like, oh, well, I had a different experience than you had. Well, you probably did, but that doesn't mean you won't have my experiences. That just means you haven't had them as long as I have. So it doesn't mean they're not going to happen. It just means they haven't happened yet. But you know, and I know, that I know what I'm talking about. And Jamaicans that come on my comment section, just like I did when I had that channel Jamaica Bob, and I pushed back against some of those things that I'm talking about now, come into my comment section and talk bad about me, and that comment will be deleted and you'll be blocked off my channel, so you can't make a comment anymore. However, if you're a respectful Jamaican that wants to push back on me in a respectful way, then I'll leave your comment. But I'm not going to deal with disrespect and tell me I don't know what I don't know and yada yada yada. It's just not going to happen, because I went through that before and I won't do it again. These are facts, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. It's just that, like I said, Jamaicans don't want to take up for the truth. They want everything to be like roses and like everything's just perfect, and it's not. There's a lot of people who leave Jamaica for the reasons that I talk about that are Jamaican. They go to Canada, they go to Great Britain, they come to America, and they go away, and they're here or there for 30 years. And then they come back at retirement age because they want to retire in their home country. But they didn't live there, because they're much better off somewhere else. But there are a lot of Jamaicans that don't want to go to those places. There are a lot of people that love that love that they can walk in their backyard and pick their breakfast, walk in their backyard and kill their dinner, you know, with the goat and the chickens and all that stuff. You know, things that we can't, that is more difficult to do here, put it like that. There's a lot of them that never want to come here. My landlord's brother was married to an American, and he never wanted to come here, and still hasn't to this day. So everybody's experience is different, but with all the good and bad and in between that I've experienced over the years, especially with that nasty little woman that I dealt with toward the end, she turned me off totally, because I felt like she was my best friend I've ever had in my life. Like, she was number one in my life as far as priority, as far as doing for her. And then it just nose bombed. It just dove and sunk, and she just ruined it beyond any repair and really screwed me over. And there's no forgiveness for that, none. And trust me, over the last 3 years, I've tried to get her to say her sorry, and she won't say she's sorry. Like, she hurt me like nobody else ever could, and no apology is ever going to come forth. And it's okay, karma's a bitch. But she was the last straw. I was already ready to leave. A couple of years before I met her, I was already thinking, how could I have a yard sale and just get rid of everything and be done with this rock? And even the time that I knew her, you know, there was still a shimmer of hope. And then I stayed.